cars are off on the circuit in Adelaide, beginning to warm tires and engines under cloudy skies with a threat of rain. We get set for the 16th and final event of the Formula One World Championship, the Grand Prix of Australia. Now here's a look at the way the teams will line up. On the pole for a record-breaking 14th time this year, Nigel Mansell with a lap averaging 114.680 miles per hour. Mansell second fastest in the morning warm-up. Next to him, Brazilian three-time world champion Ayrton Senna. Still no word about his future in 1993 with the McLaren Honda team third in the morning warm-up. On row 2, Riccardo Patrese in his final race for the Williams team. A winner 2 weeks ago in Japan in his record-extending 240th start, fastest in the warm-up. Next to him, Gerhard Berger of Austria, fourth in the warm-up in the McLaren Honda, his farewell race with the McLaren team. On row 3, Michael Schumacher of Germany in the Benetton Ford. Next to him, Jean Alesi of France in the Ferrari. On row 4 will be Andrea de Cesaris in the Tyrrell with Gilmore Power. Next to him, Englishman Martin Brundle in his final race with the Benetton Ford team. Moving back to row 5, young Frenchman Eric Comas in the Ligier Renault. Next to him, the Lotus Ford of Finn Mika Hakkinen. On row 6, Michele Alboreto in the Footwork Mugen Honda. Next to the Lotus of Johnny Herbert of Great Britain. On row 7, did you watch Alboreto and Herbert? On row 6. On row 7, Olivier Griard in the Tyrrell Ilmore, next to the BMS Dallara Ferrari of Pierluigi Martini. On row 8, Stefano Matida and Gianni Morbidelli. Row 9 will be Christian Fittipaldi, coming off his first Formula One point in Japan 2 weeks ago, and Azuri Suzuki alongside. On row 10, Nicola Larini and Maurizio Gugelmin. On row 11, Bertrand Gachot and Terry Boutsen. On row 12, Emanuele Naspetti and J.J. Leto. And on the 13th row, Jan Lammers of the Netherlands and Ukio Kadeyama. The cars pulling into place on the starting grid. It's all important to be first into the chicane. That makes up the first corner.
And Ayrton Senna there on the front row is on the wrong side of the road here. As they speed out of that right-hand corner in the top of the picture there, they all rush down the left-hand side of the road, and of course it's spread dust on that side.
As you can see, it's quite warm, cloudy, and once again we have a threat of rain. A year ago here in Australia, the shortest Grand Prix in history, just 14 laps in a downpour. We're on our way. Jean Alesi in the Ferrari off on the left, gets up on a curve with help from Gerhard Berger.
Perfect start for Mansell, though.
Mansell set up Patrese, and it looked like he took a pop. Looks like Pierluigi Martini has crossed wheels and spun.
Also, Olivier Griard.
Griard, who is out of a drive and perhaps out of Formula One at the end of this season. He crashed heavily in Japan, and now he is tangled with someone at the start here in Australia. There is Nigel Mansell.
Senna not giving up here.
That's Martini climbing out of his Dallara.
Ooh, Senna really giving Mansell a hard run for his money. Senna has been expressing a lot of confidence over the weekend that if he could get into turn 1 first, he could win this race. He's certainly not giving up without a try at the moment.
As you can see, these are the city streets in Adelaide. But as you can tell from Mansell's time, Senna goes under for the lead.
Whoa, but he overdid it on braking. A classical late braking pass there by Senna. A great job, but took himself in too far, and Mansell retook the spot. They come back into the racecourse area.
Keep in mind that red and white McLaren Honda, very heavy with a full load of fuel, much heavier than the car he's trying to catch, the blue and yellow Williams Renault of Nigel Mansell. Onto the start-finish straight. Mansell over Senna, and look at the gap back to Patrese.
Patrese being hounded there by Michael Schumacher. I think yellow flag there, of course, for the car of Pierluigi Martini, which is just around that first corner, into the Wakefield corner. Here we see a replay of the start.
Watch at the back of the pack. Griard gets sideways, gets tagged at both ends. Really not that much was his fault. Looked like one of the Jordan cars, Stefano Matida. Looks like Johnny Herbert has some damage at the front of the Lotus.
Both Jordans took to the infield there and jumped over that high curve.
Now here is Michele Alboreto in another replay, spinning it under braking and backing hard into the wall.
That's that car well and truly out. You can see it's broken the rear suspension, taking the wing off. Johnny Herbert locking up under brakes. More people running over the records. That's Maurizio Gugelmin in the Sassol Jordan. One of the marchers picking its way through the debris there. Well, boy, and here coming on the back there is Griard in that Tyrrell with the front end somewhat deranged, to say the least. Meanwhile, up at the front, these two are really having a go at it.
Now this is Patrese and Michael Schumacher closing in. Racing now into Victoria Racecourse. The circuit here in Adelaide, believe it or not, this is all temporary. We're looking down on the pit and media complex that is built entirely out of temporary buildings. This roadway they are racing over is covered over by turf during the thoroughbred racing season. Now they rush out of the park and back onto the city streets.
One of Senna's attributes this year has been some of the uncannily clever races that he has run in terms of looking after his tyres. He has always driven a very conservative pace at the start of the race, especially in places like Hungary, where he led the race and really controlled the speed. But I think today, last race on the streets here in Adelaide, he's kind of throwing caution to the wind because, as you said, his car is heavier than the Williams. It carries more fuel at the start of the race. And he is, I would say, taking everything out of those tyres on that car at the moment.
Rocketing now onto Dequetteville Terrace, which is renamed Brabham Straightaway for this race. The cars reach up to 180 miles an hour before heavy braking down here for the hairpin. Adelaide is also known as the City of Churches, and there are hundreds of examples throughout this city of 1 million. We'll be back in a moment with more. Adelaide, Australia, where Nigel Mansell leads Ayrton Senna. There goes Gerhard Berger in the fourth place McLaren Honda, just behind Mansell's teammate Ricardo Patrese. At least 4 cars have pitted to try and repair damage from the opening lap of this race when we had collisions at several different corners of the racetrack.
Gerhard Berger must have slipped around Schumacher on that lap. He had been trailing behind him. In fact, Schumacher seems to be dropping back a bit. He was, in fact, giving Patrese a very hard time for second spot. A tremendous race here going on for second, third, fourth, and fifth spot.
The running order after 3 laps is Mansell, Senna, Patrese, Berger, Schumacher, Brundle, Alesi, De Cesaris, Hakkinen, and Comas. Through Stag Corner onto Rundle Road. Then this very fast right-hander onto the fastest part of the racetrack, the 180-mile-an-hour Dequetteville Terrace.
Oh, De Cesaris there having a go at Martin Brundle. No, another go at Martin Brundle.
That's Mika Hakkinen.
Mika Hakkinen, I'm sorry. Yeah.
There comes Nigel Mansell through that same spot. All the debris scattered in those early collisions. Olivier Briard, Kelly Alboreto. I half expected a red flag, but we have not got one. We are racing.
Nigel Mansell started to make his mark here, pulling away from Senna in second spot there, but still in all, an extremely close race. And with all these instances going on around the track, obviously you never know whether you're going to be pushed into a corner, and with that sort of a lead, that is nothing yet. You can start to see those vortexes coming off these rear wings. Quite warm here in Adelaide, and also very humid, with, as you said earlier on, chance of showers this afternoon. Most peculiar, Adelaide is the driest city in the driest state of Australia, one of the driest places in the world. And 2 out of the 5 races they've had so far have been rained off, and it looks like it's going to rain this afternoon as well.
Helicopter shot from high overhead gives you a great perspective on just how quickly the cars are going. 81 laps scheduled at this 2.349-mile circuit. There's Johnny Herbert, who's one of the cars that stopped in the pits to repair front-end damage. Nigel Mansell now closing in. And Mansell beginning to open a couple of car lengths on Ayrton Senna.
Departure Nigel Mansell next year to IndyCar racing in America. Johnny Herbert will become one of England's, of course, top Formula 1 drivers, but he will be rejoined by Derek Warwick in one of the Arrows Hondas, so that would be nice to see Derek back in Formula 1. A lot of changes next year.
Martin Brundle, one of the great British Grand Prix drivers, apparently without a drive for 1993.
Look at that first chicane. Also, one of the dangers of these street circuits is obviously very limited in the space available. And turn 1 here is notorious. In fact, Nigel and Mansell was taken off at turn 1 here in the very first Grand Prix by Ayrton Senna, making a run down the inside in his Lotus and just pitched old Nigel unceremoniously up that curve and out of the race.
Nigel
always a scene of action.
Mansell has never won this race. In fact, he hadn't sat on the front row since 1986. for today's race. Senna now dropping back a bit. We learned in Japan 2 weeks ago that McLaren with heavy fuel load, carrying extra fuel for that 12-cylinder Honda engine, is very hard on its tires. All of the cars in this race using Goodyear's very softest D compound. So we expect to see pit stops for tires, particularly from the McLaren team.
Brake really glowing on Nigel's car there. The carbon fiber brakes pick up heat very quickly. They need extremely large air vents to keep them cool. And of course, this is just the sort of circuit where you've got lots of very heavy braking. This is the fastest fastest street circuit in existence, 114 miles an hour, as you said, for pole position, which is very, very quick through city street. But like all city street circuits, it has a lot of very sharp corners. But unlike most city street circuits, if you approach some of those very sharp corners, i.e. that one, from terrifically high speed, and it's very, very tough on the brakes here, tough on the drive line, of course, drive shaft, gearbox, and very tough on the driver's neck.
This is the stair-step series of corners. Wakefield Terrace, Flanders Street, East Terrace, and then this sharp right-hander onto Rundle Road. Workaday streets in Adelaide, Australia, throughout 51 weeks of the year. But since last Monday here in Adelaide, they are a part of the Adelaide Grand Prix circuit.
Adelaide, of course, is the ancestral home of the Holmes family. My mother and father were born within the sound of this racetrack. They certainly didn't think they would be in their day. They were out what they thought was the Dutch suburbs. You can hear the cars very well from out there as we see Johnny Herbert fending off Tracy, Berger and Schumacher. Herbert, of course, a lap down.
Herbert running 23rd in the field right now. On the battle between Patrese and Berger for third place. Berger, like Senna, trying to hold on to the Williams-Renault just ahead.
Johnny Herbert's year has not been a very auspicious one. He's had some very good drives. He's also had some terrible luck. Some of which has been self-inflicted, but by and large he's not had a very lucky year. But the Lotus people seem to be still behind him in their efforts. So he's Lotus this year. So far, though.
There are lots of changes. Ricardo Patrese in the blue and yellow number 6 will be going to Benetton next year. The red and white McLaren, who knows to whom it will go. Michael Andretti, incidentally, who of course comes to Formula One racing with the McLaren team next year, will begin his career with his first test in a week's time at Silverstone in Great Britain. Adelaide, Australia, the site of the Grand Prix of Australia. In Adelaide, Australia, Nigel Mansell, the race leader from the green light, heads Ayrton Senna, and then this huge gap back to the battle for third place between number 6, Ricardo Patrese, and Gerhard Berger, with Michael Schumacher in close attendance just behind.
Well, boy, that was a bit close. Patrese obviously having to work extremely hard to hold Gerhard Berger off here. The McLarens at last seem to have found a circuit that suits them. Both of them going extremely well this afternoon, but of course, day late, $1 short.
There are the intervals. The various front runners behind Nigel Mansell. Mansell looking for his record-extending 10th victory in a season. He is already holder of the Formula One records for poles in a season with 14 out of 16 races, and points in a season with 108.
I'm afraid that, as a lot of you know, James Hunt has been pretty vociferous in his lack of enthusiasm for Ricardo Patrese right from the drop of the green flag in the South African race at the beginning of the season. But it certainly would appear on the case of it, on the face of it, that Ricardo Patrese really is not probably up to the job in hand, because Nigel Mansell with 108 points is exactly twice as many points as Ricardo Patrese, who's second in the championship with 56 points. And considering they're both driving the same car, obviously making everybody else look completely stupid in terms of car design and engineering capability, it is pretty much of an indictment on poor old Ricardo that he is so far behind. And he's obviously having to work extremely hard to hold Gerhard Berger at bay here.
James Hunt had some unkind things to say about Nigel Mansell at the recent Japanese Grand Prix, saying that Nigel was basically taking the easy way out by taking the World Championship and going to IndyCar cars rather than staying in Formula One and defending it on even terms against the likes of Alain Prost, who has already signed with Williams-Renault for 1993.
Nigel, too, was pretty upfront. He said he didn't want to defend it on even terms. He wanted to defend it like this year, i.e. having a co-driver or a teammate of Ricciardo's caliber, which would make life extremely easy for Nigel. So I guess everybody wants everything their way as we go back on board with old Michael Schumacher, who really is, in my opinion, the man of the moment, the man of the year. And boy, I'd like to see him in a Williams to see what he can do. There's no doubt about it, the Benetton is an extremely good car, but the Ford V8, I don't think, has just got quite enough muscle to handle the Renault V10, or for that matter, the Honda V12.
Michael Schumacher will be Riccardo Patrese's teammate next year. Schumacher with a victory in Belgium this year, a couple of second-place finishes, and 4 thirds, his best performances of the year. Schumacher went back to Italy as you look at Gerhard Berger looking down the inside of Riccardo Patrese one more time. Schumacher did not stay here in the Pacific Rim between Japan and Australia. He went back and tested with Benetton on their 1993 spec machine. Of course, Ford's Cosworth colleagues have created a new 12-cylinder Formula One engine, and the question is, why hasn't the Benetton team been using it? Schumacher came back from his Benetton test to say the 1993 Benetton will likely once again be a Ford V8. The question is, what is wrong with the Cosworth 12-cylinder engine that Benetton will not use it?
Well, it appears that the 12-cylinder engine cars, obviously one of them being the red and white McLaren Honda there, the 12-cylinder engines are just a little bit too long and a little bit too heavy, use just a bit too much fuel, and the 10-cylinder 3.5-litre engines do seem to be an ideal configuration for these Formula One cars. Honda, of course, maintains that if they had stayed in for another year or two, that they would have developed their 12 to be good enough.
There you can see what the new Williams-Renault and Nigel Mansell in combination have been able to accomplish. Keep in mind, he was driving a Williams-Renault in 1991. But this year, with the semi-automatic transmission that caused so many headaches last year, and the self-leveling suspension, known as Active Ride, Nigel Mansell has really come into his own. The battle between Patrese and Berger continues as they lap Ukio Katayama in one of the LaRousse cars.
Yeah, Berger keeps trying at the end of that Brabham straight into that very tight right-hander as they come back onto Wakefield Road and into the park. There's going to have to be the old brain box going in and work out a suitable strategy. Unfortunately, the 10-cylinder Renault certainly is superior on handling, and for instance through here and through this next series of corners, as you said, the step series of corners which are about to come up, it certainly can put some distance between himself and the Honda. And then of course Berger's trying to make it all up in one corner, which is both inefficient and unfortunately, as you can see, necessary for him, because look how much Patrese pulled out in just these last few corners. And Berger has to put it all back in one corner, which is extremely frustrating for him.
Dark clouds still hovering on the horizon. Up front, Nigel Mansell in red number 5, and Ayrton Senna go around one of the March cars.
That's probably Jan Lammers. Jan Lammers, of course, after what, a 12-year break from Formula One, come back to do the last 2 races of the year and qualified and run in both of them, which I think says a lot for him.
10 years and 3 months, to be exact. 162 Grands Prix went into the record books between Jan Lammers' most recent start for the Japanese Grand Prix two weeks ago.
When you think of the list of fairly exalted people that have failed to make the cut this year, for him to just come up out of the box and do 2 races after such a long time, I think there's a lot for him. He obviously must be a very good little driver, and he is little. He's even smaller now.
Nigel Mansell pulls away from the McLaren Honda of Ayrton Senna on Rundle Road as the laps continue to roll on in the Grand Prix of Australia. 16 now in the book, 81 scheduled. Australia, Nigel Mansell, the leader, under fire, and Senna hits him in the rear. Mansell and Senna make nose-to-tail contact and spin off at the final corner before the start-finish straightaway.
Boy, oh boy, we could see that coming, and for some reason, Nigel Mansell just so disappointed. He's not going to have that 10th win. What a way to end your last race. I don't quite know. We'll have to see a replay of that, I'm sure we will, but they came up to lap a lot of traffic, and it was obvious that we were going to see some action, and for some reason or other, the Australians went back to the race between Patrese and Berger, And, of course, we came back just in time to see that now. Is old Nigel going to get to it?
You're going to get brave and try and cross the racetrack? I guess he is. There is Senna walking past the Williams-Renault, the drive he so covets for 1993, but apparently will not get. It could be the last race in Formula One for both men. Mansell perhaps forever, Senna perhaps for a year. His teammate, Gerhard Berger, says Senna has told him that he will take a sabbatical. He will not race in Formula One in 1993. Meanwhile, Riccardo Patrese assumes the race lead. Now here's another look at the contact.
Boy, oh boy, he just seemed to pick up speed through that corner, and
he certainly had a good long look at Mansell ahead of him, slowing down.
He caught him up unbelievably quickly there. I think that he was just on a big roll and was determined to try and whistle by him on braking, and Nigel was right in the middle of the road.
Both drivers threw their hands in the air. Nigel in obvious anger, Senna almost in a shrug, as though to say, what could I do? There is your new race leader, the blue and yellow number 6, followed closely by Gerhard Berger. Another Williams versus McLaren battle. There you see the gap from Patrese to Berger, and just about 2 seconds behind is Michael Schumacher in the Benetton, and then a gap of about 10 seconds to Martin Brundle.
I think the caliber of Mansell, Senna and Patrese was pretty well illustrated just before the accident, when Senna and Mansell had pulled out 18 seconds on Patrese. However, Patrese is now leading his second Grand Prix of the year, but he too is coming under immense pressure from the McLaren Honda of Gerhard Berger. I somehow can't see him holding him off for the rest of the race.
Both of these drivers with victories to their credit this season. Berger going to try the outside, and he makes it. Well, he almost made it.
That's exactly what Senna did on the first lap of the course. That allowed, in fact, Berger to slip back into the clutches of Michael Schumacher, who's just coming into the picture there as well, hanging on extremely well. So now Berger's got to go third all over again, and of course, no doubt, that left front has got a pretty severe flat spot on it, so he gets offline onto the dusty part of the track. Then he slows up, lifts out of the throttle, goes wide, and Patrese reassumes the lead.
Berger was bidding for the lead. All kinds of tire smoke up ahead just here.
Yeah, well, it's not coming.
No car to be seen. Berger was no doubt trying for the lead because he's got that tire stop coming up, and he desperately wanted to get out front and see if he could open up some ground on Patrese and then wage a battle in the pits.
Now that's taken the immediate pressure off Patrese, who, if he can just concentrate here on turning in some fast laps, which obviously is much easier to do if you haven't got the guy behind you breathing down your neck.
Here comes Michael Schumacher in the Benetton, closing in on Gerhard Berger. Riccardo Patrese, the winner in Japan 2 weeks ago. Berger, who won in Canada back in June. And Schumacher, who won in Belgium. The order behind them is Brundle in 4th, Jean Alesi in the Ferrari in 5th, Andrea De Cesaris in 6th in the Tyrrell, followed by Stefano Matta, Gianni Morbidelli, Terry Boutsen, and Aguri Suzuki.
So, as you say, we now have got running in 1, 2, and 3 the only other 3 drivers other than Nigel Mansell to have won one race this year. So every one of these drivers has won a race. So every one of them has a great deal at stake to make sure he's the only 2-time winner in the whole of the 1992 season, other than Nigel Mansell, who of course has won 9.
Word from the pits is that Nigel Mansell had a few unprintable, not to mention unannounceable, comments, and has now locked himself in the Williams team trailer. Mansell furious in his Formula One farewell race, knocked out in a collision with Ayrton Senna.
Well, it did seem like one of Senna's, every now and then Senna makes a mistake, and every time he makes a mistake he seems to make huge ones. Obviously one remembers running into the back of Prost in Japan, but I mean, boy, he just seemed to just run straight into the back of
Michael Schumacher going around slower traffic, one of the March cars, trying to stay up with this battle. Patrese and Berger for the race lead here in Australia.
Berger has pulled back all that time he lost. Now he's got to go through the whole episode again. He's obviously got to concentrate on hanging on to Patrese between turns 1, which is just coming up now, after this start-finish straight. He's got to try and concentrate on getting through these corners to hang on to Patrese so that when they do come back to the Duquetteville straight, he can be a little bit closer and not have to make up so much ground on that one corner. Hanging on very well this time. This is a corner, that series of corners where just a few laps ago, Patrese managed to put a lot of daylight between himself and Berger. This time, Berger seems to be hanging on just a bit better. Partly momentum. He ran up on Patrese. But you see, Patrese just could always pull it out for that third combat.
Victoria Square in downtown Adelaide, where the Christmas decorations are going up as spring arrives in the Antipodes. We'll be back. Across the start-finish line at about 145 miles an hour, Ricardo Patrese bids for his second victory of the 1992 Formula One season, leading Gerhard Berger by less than a second with 26 laps complete of 81 schedule. Bob Barsha and David Hobbs, glad to have you with us for this last event of the World Driving Championship this year. There's the gap between Patrese and Berger, Schumacher, Brundle, and Alesi. Behind Alesi, Andrea De Cesaris is in the 6th and final points-paying position, followed by Stefano Modena, Terry Boutsen, Gianni Morbidelli, and Aguri Suzuki rounding out the top 10. Christian Fittipaldi is 11th, followed by Mika Hakkinen, J.J. Leto, Bertrand Gasho, Nicola Larini, Emanuele Naspetti, Jan Lammers, and Ukio Katayama.
There is Nicola Larini about to be lapped by the leading duo as they come down that Brabham straight.
Nicola Larini driving that active suspension Ferrari. They are racing the car in its development, trying to get that active suspension working for the 1993 season. Larini and his teammate Jean Alesi paid a visit this week to a cystic fibrosis treatment wing of a children's hospital here in Adelaide. I'm sorry to report that of the top drivers who were invited to attend, only the Ferrari teammates showed up. Now here's a look at the Adelaide circuit, David.
Well, as we see, you go past the start-finish line, 145 miles an hour. Then you have that long series of corners, the first chicane, that left, right, left. And then, of course, we've got some sharp, well-delineated corners. Up into the top left-hand corner of the map there, the Stag corner, so-called, because it's in front of a pub called the Stag. And we start to pick up speed there, up into 4th, then that long, 5th fast right-hand onto Duquetteville straight. 185 miles an hour down there in the city street. And then that very sharp right-hander where we saw Berger having a go consistently at Patrese, and back into the park with those two left-hand sweeps, and then a run up to the final hairpin. Lots of gear shifting here, 2.35 miles around, and very tough on transmissions and drivers. Schumacher trying to work his way around Larini now as well. Larini on the inside there somewhere. These are those two left-handers going into the park. A bit of a lift here, down to 3rd for this one. Up to 5th again on these two fast right-hand sweeps. Hard on the brakes for the final right-hand second gear hairpin onto the pit straight. As I said earlier, very, very tough on brakes and tyres. Talking of which, with 28 laps under their belt, we should expect to see some tyre stop action fairly soon. These two drivers very well placed to have a pit stop, and one of them, with a very quick stop, could come out ahead.
Speaking of tires, we'd be remiss if we went any farther in this broadcast without saying a quick get well to Lee Gogg, manager of Formula One racing for the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company. This is Lee's final Grand Prix race. At the age of 69, Lee is going to retire. We will miss him desperately, I'm sure, in the future. Ironically enough, in 13 years of going to every Formula One race, Lee had missed only 2 until this, his farewell appearance in Formula One. Lee is in bed with the flu. He is not in the pit lane. Lee, if you can hear us, or whenever you hear this broadcast, a happy retirement to you. You deserve it, buddy.
I hate to think of the miles that Lee has flown. He spent 22 years as a marine pilot and, 10 years flying backwards and forwards from Akron to the World Championship Formula One scene, plus all the testing. So he's flown millions of miles.
Well, we can get him on our broadcast. I think we have some really interesting stories.
Anyway, he's two guys, talk about flying, are absolutely flying around the streets of Adelaide. Senna, just before his demise, set the fastest lap at a 1:17.8, which is about 110 miles an hour average.
Now you see the gap from third place Michael Schumacher to his teammate Martin Brundle. Schumacher will be co-number 1 with Ricardo Patrese in next year's Benetton Ford team. Martin Brundle, after scoring in 10 of the last 11 races, is out of a drive.
Such is the fickle finger of fate in Formula One. As they come up to lap Bertrand Gachot.
Roos car in the foreground. They'll be using the Lamborghini V12 engine exclusively next year.
The LaRousse team in the newspapers again this week. One of the partners of the LaRousse organization was arrested for running a car steering ring, as we see Gerhard Berger getting trapped by back into the park. Up to the gearbox, down to third with his tight left hand.
Forgive me, David, but he was not arrested. According to the reports in the newspaper, when the police surrounded him, he pulled out a hand grenade, took one of the policemen hostage, and escaped.
That is the Formula One scene at the moment.
A big happy family, aren't we?
There's Stefano Modena in the Jordan. That looks like Andrea De Cesaris pulling off the left there. Andrea De Cesaris, who was running in 7th spot. Well and truly on fire. Does he know that?
Oil fire out the back of the car. Andrea De Cesaris will be back with Tyrrell next year, who this weekend has confirmed that they have announced an exclusive contract to drive a rebadged V10 Judd engine as a Yamaha next year. The first time in 25 years in Formula One for Ken Tyrrell that he has had an exclusive relationship with a manufacturer to provide engines.
That puts Stefano Modena up to 6th spot. Stefano Modena was the man we were looking on the grid, who I was saying was probably on the bubble for 1993 as far as the drive goes with Jordan. Maybe he's just saving his career here.
Ricardo Patrese looking for his second victory. Keep in mind, Ricardo has had 4 vicious accidents this year. One in Estoril in testing, another in practice for the Grand Prix. Plenty more still to come from Australia. In Adelaide, Australia, the Victoria Park Thoroughbred Racetrack converted into a Formula One World Championship circuit. Ricardo Patrese with Gerhard Berger just behind. We expect pit stops shortly here as we approach the halfway mark. Here's a look at the intervals. 33 laps now complete as the leaders cross the start-finish line and whistle back out of the park and onto the public roads of Adelaide.
Patrese and Berger just had to find their way past J.J. Leto and Christian Fittipaldi, who are now 1 lap down. They're battling for 11th and 12th spot. They're only just about a second apart themselves, so they aren't just about to let the leaders go past all that easily when they're battling against themselves.
Now here is a look at the incident that took the 2 leaders out of this race. Nigel Mansell, under braking, clobbered from behind for no apparent reason by Ayrton Senna. Both drivers have locked themselves away after being examined by doctors. Nigel has a sore back. That elevated the blue and yellow number 6 of Ricardo Patrese to the lead. The red and white McLaren of Gerhard Berger just behind. Both drivers in their last appearances in these cars. Now there comes Christian Fittipaldi being passed by third place Michael Schumacher.
Well, the fact is that Senna did seem to be blindingly quick through those 2 last right-hand sweeps as we came into Victoria Park, up to the right-hand hairpin before the pits, but he just seemed to completely throw caution completely to the winds and try to get it all in one go.
Did I see behind, I believe McLaren was not there on the pit straight. He may have pitted. I think the next car to come into your picture will be the Benetton. I think it is. Gerhard Berger must have pitted. Berger is in the pits now. We can confirm getting a new set of tires, which should carry him the rest of the way. That will allow Ricardo Patrese some breathing room, and he can try to extend his lead before making his pit stop. Now there is Berger back out.
Back out on new warm tires. He will have an immediate performance advantage for just a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see now whether Patrese does stop.
Of the 26 cars that began the race, 18 remain in the running. The last car, Johnny Herbert, 3 laps down after a long pit stop to replace damage to the front end as he was collected in a multi-car crash in the first chicane.
Nicola Larini in the active suspended Ferrari. One of the problems with those Ferraris this year is their falling lack of straight line speed. So they seem to handle okay, but they have no straight line speed at all, which is obviously something the Ferrari engineers are going to have to work on very hard over the winter.
The Ferraris were the absolute slowest cars in a straight line in Japan. They are somewhat improved here in Australia. Of course, new technical director Dr. Harvey Postlethwaite created a furor at Monza, the Italian Grand Prix this year, when he suggested publicly that Ferrari should have its engines built elsewhere, perhaps in Great Britain, let's say. Not the kind of thing that goes down well with the Tifosi.
Not at all. As the sun comes out, you can see those shadows firming up now, and so the temperature will rise very dramatically here in the southern hemisphere. This time of the year, the sun is very, very much overhead, very low numbers in latitude here in Oz, so the temperature will rise very rapidly as the sun comes out, and that may hurry both these drivers into the pit to change their tyres.
Now, Riccardo Patrese, 1993 Benetton teammate, beginning to close up rapidly on him. Michael Schumacher rocketing around. Perhaps Patrese has his pit stop coming up now.
Looks like Johnny Herbert in front of Patrese. I think it's on the low. It's hard to tell.
No stop this time around for Patrese. Gerhard Berger back on the track in 3rd position. There's the 2nd place car of Michael Schumacher. Appears to have dropped back just a little bit now.
Well, I don't know. Has he? Patrese just had some lap traffic in front of him. There's quite a gaggle of cars in front of him. If he catches those up at the wrong place on this track, obviously that will allow Schumacher to really close the gap, as we see the gap from Schumacher back to Berger. Berger, of course, that is after having had a stop, so it was obviously a very quick stop.
We talk about 6-second stop in Formula One. The Fuji Television Network in Japan 2 weeks ago sponsored a pit stop contest that was won by Ferrari. The top 4 teams, all the finalists in that competition, completed 4 tire changes in less than 5 seconds.
Of course, they could use the entire staff of the factory, the staff of the grounds and everything else as well on change tires.
Staff of several small countries.
Mika Hakkinen not making things easy for Patrese there. Again, as they go into the park, so he's got to have to follow him through this complex of corners, which will really play into Schumacher's hands.
Listen to Schumacher work the shifter around this circuit.
Right now, I thought Patrese may use that opportunity to go in the pit. Obviously not.
Schumacher with a great opportunity to close up here. As Riccardo Patrese runs up behind the Lotus of Mika Hakkinen.
This, of course, is a classic case of where, for instance, if that was either Senna or Mansell, I don't think they'd have allowed themselves to got trapped quite so badly behind the car they were lapping for the 2nd time.
Mika Hakkinen running in 10th position. The last car on the lead lap. Behind Hakkinen, Fittipaldi, Leto, Gasho, Larini, Laubers, Nascetti, Katayama, and Herbert are all at least 1 lap down.
Yeah, I said twice. Of course, I was thinking because he spun, didn't he, a few laps back, and I thought he was already a lap down.
It's a bit of a red kangaroo, the native species here in Australia. Stay with us for more from Adelaide. Australia, race leader Riccardo Patrese streaks around out of the Victoria racetrack and back onto the workaday streets here in Adelaide. We are at the halfway point, 40 laps in the books, 81 scheduled. I mentioned earlier that Riccardo has had 4 huge crashes this year. As you look at the intervals of the front runners behind them, pit stop right there for Martin Brundle. Benetton's strategy was to pit Brundle, but not to pit Schumacher, presently running in 2nd position. Getting back to Patrese right there, his 4 crashes this year. 1 was in preseason testing in Portugal when his suspension failed. 1 was in practice for the San Marino Grand Prix when he punctured a tire. He had another when he was hit by Eric Comas in the Ligier at Silverstone. And then finally that huge flight of some 300 feet he took at Portugal just a couple of months ago. Nevertheless, Riccardo Patrese today is in the running for his second victory of the season, which would lock up second place in the World Championship.
This is a very interesting battle here, Bob, because they're right in the midst of an incredibly tough battle for 9th, 10th and 11th spot. And so none of these drivers are willing to let them by. There's Aguri Suzuki in the arrows, being followed by Schumacher, who's now being followed by Berger, who's pulled back 9 seconds, while Schumacher has been trying to work his way through this traffic. Berger, with superior power from 12-cylinder engines, has managed to dispose of these people easier. Harkonnen held up Patrese for a long way. Patrese slipped by him and also slipped around Suzuki pretty quickly. Then he got held up by Morbidelli. Meanwhile, Schumacher was held up by Harkonnen, and none of these guys wanted to give up any ground because they're all racing against each other. That allowed Berger to catch up on the whole shooting match, and Riccardo Patrese, who has finally disposed of Morbidelli, has now streaked off and has a 3-second lead. So we've got a lot of interesting things going on here, with everybody fighting furiously amongst themselves and not willing to give up an inch of road to let anybody through.
Brilliant condensation, partner. Heading for the Brabham Straight. Right here, the Australians paid more than $500,000 US to have this part of the racetrack widened by 4 meters and resurfaced. Now Berger going down the inside of Schumacher.
As Bruce McLaren said 25 years ago, a good big one will always beat a good little one. And there we just saw the superiority of 12 cylinders over 8 as the horsepower of that Honda, probably another 50 over that Ford V8, managed to get it right there. Schumacher, obviously, so their strategy is now changing. This is different from what we were told their strategy would be. Schumacher is in fact coming to a stop.
Stopwatch is on him. Clean stop, a little extra care in cleaning out the radiators of the side pod. 6.51 seconds, pretty conservative. The same cannot be said, however, for his pit exit, and he comes out right behind Nicola Larini.
Now all those people he just struggled so hard to get past have now repassed him. One of the things that made it very interesting in his little battle, for instance, Mika Harkonnen, is they both had the same Ford V8 engine, so he had no advantage, and it's very difficult to pass around here, whereas Berger and Patrese both, of course, could slip by the V8 engine car much easier. So, different strokes for different folks again, but again, you just can't beat having just a little bit more power than the other guy.
This, of course, is the last race for Honda in Formula One for the immediate future. They have been surpassed by French Renault engines in the Williams-Renault that has so dominated this season. Andrew Marriott, who normally handles pit reporting chores for us here in Formula One, takes a closer look at the ultimate Formula One weapon in 1992 in a track fact.
The ground in the car constant, and they make the best use of all the aerodynamics. Schumacher squeezes by Bertrand Gachot in the Venturi LaRousse.
Gachot running 13th. Schumacher third after that pit stop. 6 cars, the points paying 6 cars running on the lead lap. They are Patrese, Berger, Schumacher, Brundle, Alesi, and Terry Boutsen in the points for the first time this year for Ligier. Incidentally, rumors abound in Adelaide that Guy Ligier will sell his team in the next week or two.
The rumours, of course, were that he would sell it to McLaren so they could use the Renault engines, but apparently that deal has been absolutely, resolutely squashed by Renault because they only want to see Renault engines on Elf Oil, and of course Shell have a very long relationship with McLaren, so that deal is off.
It's one of the stories that will continue to boil during the off-season in Formula One. There goes Gerhard Berger running in second position. Behind him, Schumacher, Brundle, and now Alesi and Boutsen round out the top 6. We'll be back with more from Adelaide. ESPN at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific tonight. There is Riccardo Patrese, who took over the lead when his teammate Nigel Mansell, the new world champion, and Ayrton Senna collided here in Adelaide. Patrese has led since.
And interesting enough, as the only one of the top 3 drivers who has not stopped to change tyres and still seems to be able to manage a pretty good clip. Gerhard Berger is now 5.9 seconds behind as of the last lap. So he is pulling Patrese in, but slowly but surely. But there's a long way to So the thing is, will Patrese try and make it to the end on those tires, or will he stop and change?
Michael Schumacher in the Benetton is third, about 18 seconds behind Berger. Then the gap is another 9 seconds to Martin Brundle in fourth, half a minute back to Jean Alesi in fifth, and another 20 seconds to Terry Boutsen in sixth, the only other unlapped car in the field. Stefano Modena, Aguri Suzuki, Mika Hakkinen, Gianni Morbidelli, Christian Fittipaldi, J.J. Leto, and Bertrand Gachot, all one lap down, as is Nicola Larini and Jan Lammers. Emanuele Naspetti 2 laps down, Johnny Herbert in the Lotus 3 laps in arrears.
And as is now Thierry Boutsen, because while you were reading off the scoreboard there, our leader, Patrese, he slipped underneath Thierry Boutsen at the end of the Brabham Straight. So now Thierry is a lap down. So
I was going to get to this.
I thought you would.
There is Gerhard Berger, who will be a Ferrari driver next year. His teammate Ayrton Senna spoke quite forthrightly about Gerhard Berger, saying he was spoiled in his last association with Ferrari, that he had much to learn when he came to McLaren, and no doubt to learn from a man like Ayrton Senna, a 3-time world champion. But, says Senna, Berger is now one of the top drivers in Formula One. He'll be a great credit to Ferrari next year. For his part, Gerhard Berger was asked when he will begin testing with Ferrari. He says, I don't know. I have no plans to test. They have no new equipment for me to test yet. So I'm going to stay out of things until they tell me they have some new stuff, as he put it, and then I'll go out and test it.
He said, I don't need to test myself. I only need to test new equipment, so there's no point practically what he means if he wants to go skiing in Austria. There you see the gap between first and second. Thierry Boutsen in the middle there. That gap now down to just over 4 seconds. So Berger now marching steadily up on Riccardo Patrese.
Terry Boutsen, another former winner of this race. He beat this man, Riccardo Patrese, when they were Williams-Renault teammates back in 1989 in one of the great wet Australian Grands Prix.
Patrese electing not to stop this lap either, so it certainly makes one wonder at this stage, with the 48 laps gone, just 33 to go, whether in fact he will try and stick it out to the end.
Here's a list of former winners of this race. Of course, Keke Rosberg, world champion back in 1985, won. Alain Prost, a 2-time winner of this race. Terry Boutsen pulled the surprise in 1989 in the wet. Actually, Riccardo Patrese might have gotten him in the closing laps of the race, but he spun off. Nelson Piquet picked up a big surprise for Benetton back in 1990. Remember that final corner down in the hairpin. Mansell in the Ferrari and Piquet down together. Wow.
That was it. I remember it well. Gerhard Berger obviously managed to get around Thierry Boutsen there. And as you can see, down to just 4 seconds, 3.966 seconds behind Riccardo Patrese now. So he streaks down Brabham Straight, 180 odd miles an hour.
Gerhard Berger is now set fast lap of the race. 1 minute 17.502 seconds. 109.739 miles per hour. That's a new record.
Also a good clip through city streets, I'd say, 109 average.
There's been much going on in Formula One, particularly on the rule side, as you look down on all of that temporary structure. I know it's hard to believe, but it's true. That will all be a big grassy field surrounded by a horse racing track. Here you see Berger's numbers. Among the new changes, the Formula One race set for Autopolis on the island of Honshu in Japan. And Patrese with a problem. Almost tagged by Berger.
Boy, that's a terrible place for him to have to stop. That flag marshal could be just a little bit more enthusiastic, I think, considering he's just around the corner. Now that is most
absolutely stunning development. What has happened to Riccardo Patrese? The car is in a dangerous spot, and that opens up a world of possibilities. Gerhard Berger becomes the leader. Michael Schumacher is the man who desperately needs the 10 points for victory. If he gets them, he could pass, certainly would pass, Riccardo Patrese for second place in the World Championship.
Well, that is a stunning development because it is absolutely uncanny, almost eerie in fact, that every time Nigel Mansell has dropped out of the race this year, Riccardo Patrese has followed him out. The only 3 times they've had a problem has been when Nigel's had a problem. The only time he hasn't followed him out was last week or 2 weeks ago in Japan. Other than that, every time Nigel's had a problem, Patrese has been out.
And as you might expect, Patrese said afterwards that Nigel's engine problem was the same problem that Ricciardo had earlier in the weekend. They changed Ricciardo's engine because of an unrelated difficulty, and he, of course, went on to win the race. There's your new race leader. Gosh, he comes close to those corner workers just standing around that car. Here's a look at Jackie the Koala in the arms of the handsome young announcer. We'll be back with more from Australia. Adelaide, Australia, lots of dark clouds overhead, but thankfully not a drop of rain just yet. Mika Hakkinen being closed in on by the second-place Benetton of Michael Schumacher, who got a little closer than he would have liked there and slammed on the brakes.
Well, this is deja vu all over again here for poor old Michael Schumacher, because he had a heck of a struggle to get around Mika Hakkinen just a few laps back. Stopped to change tyres, now he's got to do it all over again. But, as I say, with a very evenly matched engines, it's a lot easier said than done for Schumacher, although he squeaked by there. Hakkinen did actually let him through. Hakkinen's not giving up because that red and white car just going out of the picture, the Aguri Suzuki, is that far in front of Hakkinen, and they are racing for 8th and 9th spot. Well, with the way of attrition in Formula One races, they are just a few spots away from point-scoring position, so they're unlikely to give up their race just to let the leaders through.
And still, the car of Riccardo Patrese has not been moved. 3 laps now. Patrese stricken car is sitting there to watch Martin Brundle now up into 3rd place. If the race were to end now, another podium for Martin Brundle. Points in 11 out of 12 races, and I still can't get over it. He does not have a drive for next year. Now we're beginning to see raindrops on the onboard camera.
Boy, oh boy, this is just a driver's nightmare. The track's all nicely greased down, and now it's going to be sprayed down as well.
None on this camera, however. It just appears to be raining right on this section. Terrific. This is Rundle Road just before they go rocketing on. No, I take that back. They're on the straightaway, on Brabham Straight. Great. Just the kind of place you want to have it. Here's a look at where our points leaders are. The world champion Nigel Mansell is out of his last Formula One race. Riccardo Patrese has just broken. Ayrton Senna went out in a collision with Mansell. Schumacher now runs 2nd. Gerhard Berger is the race leader. Martin Brundle is 3rd. Jean Alesi in the Ferrari is 4th. 5th is Terry Boutsen. And 6th, Stefano Maranello. The first time we've seen the Jordan-Yamaha combination in the points.
There you can see the rain starting to come down hard on the camera lens, so obviously it's coming down hard on the drivers as well.
And this is just leaving the front straightaway, so that rain is spreading around the circuit. There's Gerhard Berger. As I mentioned, there are rules changes being considered. An extraordinary meeting of the World Motorsport Council has been called for the 11th of December in Paris. Among the rules they will consider are changing the number of drivers that teams will be allowed to use. In 1993, they are proposing that one car will have one driver. The other car may be shifted among 3 drivers as often as the teams want. On board with Schumacher beginning to lose a little traction there. Perhaps most important, the race schedule for Autopolis Japan may be canceled. The track is in bankruptcy, and the receiver, or trustee in bankruptcy if you like, has said they will not run the race. But if a promoter can be found, that Grand Prix of Asia may take place. If not, it will open up a spot on the schedule next year, perhaps to get Mexico back on. They're talking about a possible Swiss Grand Prix to be held in France or Italy, since motor racing is not allowed in Switzerland by law. And there is the possibility, of course, of a U.S. Grand Prix if a spot opens up on the 93 schedule.
Riccardo Patrese car still parked just around that corner. All the drivers obviously know it's there now. And if this rain is going to continue, the track gets slippery as we go on board with Martin Brundle. That car is in a very dangerous place. Obviously, though, it's also extremely dangerous to move it. So, any volunteers? Well, no, thank you. One of the problems with these semi-automatic gearboxes is they get stuck in gear, and of course you can't move the car. We saw that with Riccardo Patrese in the streets of Phoenix 2 years ago when he got stuck and they couldn't move it.
Here comes Gianni Morbidelli in the black and yellow car in the foreground, followed by his teammate Christian Fittipaldi.
And that is a race for a place.
Fittipaldi Fittipaldi, of course, scored his first Grand Prix championship point in Japan 2 weeks ago. The first time a Fittipaldi family member had scored since Uncle Emerson was 6th in the family team car at the Grand Prix of Monte Carlo back in 1980. Glistening tires on the McLaren Honda of Gerhard Berger. This part of the course still appears to be a bit dry, but it could quickly turn diabolical. If the rain continues to fall here in Australia, things will really start to get interesting. Back in Adelaide, Australia, Michael Schumacher circulates in second place in the Grand Prix of Australia. Final event in the Formula One World Driving Championship for 1992. Gerhard Berger has just reset the lap record, 1 minute 17.5 seconds, approaching 110 miles an hour in average speed. This is the quickest street circuit in all of motorsports.
Now Martin Brundle's catching up to, they moved the Trajan's car just a bit. He is right behind now Fittipaldi and Morbidelli, who are racing desperately for that 9th and 10th spot. And as I say, the way these Formula One races go, when people start to drop out like flies, it's very desperate that they maintain those, because they could suddenly find themselves on the point, which is of such importance to these drivers and their teams and sponsors.
There's talk of Pierluigi Martini returning to the Minardi team in 1993. Were that to happen, he would have to bump either Christian Fittipaldi or Gianni Morbidelli, both of whom are closely tied to that team. Down into the hairpin, Morbidelli, Fittipaldi, and the Benetton of Martin Brundle. Here's our Suzuki race recap. Gerhard Berger, the leader, the third leader in the race. 2 lead changes. Berger has led 4 laps of the 55 completed thus far, and he holds the fast lap of the race. Behind him, Schumacher, Brundle, Alesi, Boutsen, and Modena in the 6 points-paying positions. Aguri Suzuki is 7th, followed by Mika Hakkinen, Gianni Morbidelli, Christian Fittipaldi, Nicola Larini, J.J. Leto, Jan Lammers, Emanuele Naspetti, Johnny Herbert. And those are the 15 cars that remain circulating of the 26 starters in this race. Brundle does away with Christian Fittipaldi.
Christian Fittipaldi just did that just so well. He let him through, hardly lost any time, momentum himself, just made enough room. Brundle grasped the situation that was given to him, and neither of them came out badly on that. Very well done by Fittipaldi.
Well, that part of the racetrack looked awfully wet. Word from the pits now is that Riccardo Patresi's car, you can just see on the right of your screen there, suffered no discernible problem on the team's telemetry system in the pits. They suspect it was a gearbox lockup.
I guess it must, because it's still, although they've moved it down from the corner just a little bit, it's still in a pretty dangerous position. There we see Stefano Modena about to... He's trying to get around that march. Where that parked car gets a bit dangerous. Schumacher forced his way past both of them. Stefano Modena running in 6th spot for a point, so he's going to be just a little bit careful at this stage.
As Emanuele Naspetti's march they went around, the march team is scheduled to make a major sponsorship announcement, which kept that team out of the bankruptcy court in England. In fact, in a hearing at the High Court in London last week, the sponsors stepped forward to prevent the team from being liquidated. Meanwhile, a man reportedly got up at the back of the room from Britain's version of our IRS, the Inland Revenue Service, to say that he wanted to see the team liquidated. When he found out what the name of the team was, he realized he was in the wrong hearing, that he was there for the winding up of the Brabham team's parent organization, Motor Racing Developments. That bankruptcy hearing was going on just down the hall. So I guess they're kidding when they say the recession has really struck in Formula One.
Well, it has really struck in Formula One, and of course we've got some other pretty bad news really for Formula One, is that Nigel Mansell, of course, is going to American racing. Great for America, of course. And Senna himself is looking to make a sabbatical. And the rumor is that Bernie Eccleston is not here this weekend because he is, in fact, in America attempting to do a deal with Carl Haas to buy out Mansell's contract to get him back into Formula One. Where he would go back into Formula One, of course, we don't know. He would probably only go back into Williams. All this, of course, is pure conjecture and rumour, so I don't really take much notice of it. But it is going to be serious if neither Senna nor Mansell appear in Formula One next year, because they are absolutely undoubtedly the two most popular drivers anywhere we go in the world.
A couple of teams wondering about their futures. The Ferrari,
Two teammates here, next year's teammates.
Jean Alesi in the number 27 red Ferrari, and Gerhard Berger for now in the red and white McLaren. Alesi will let his teammate from next year go by. There have been rumblings that Alesi is not happy with the deal Berger struck with the Ferrari team, particularly as regards equipment. Berger has said things to try to calm the waters a little bit, saying he expects to get identical equipment to that provided to Alesi. 21 laps remaining. This, of course, the last race for Honda. Berger, the last Honda engine, factory Honda engine that is in the field. Of course, footwork Mugen Hondas are in footwork cars. Here's a look at what Honda has accomplished in Formula One. 185 starts, 70 victories, 74 poles. And those numbers include this event this weekend. The Honda factory team, Spirit, Williams, McLaren, Lotus have all sported Honda engines at one time or another.
What percentage of 185 is one?
You're asking the wrong guy.
That's my contribution to their Formula One career.
That's right. You drove the factory Honda at one time.
I drove that. It was a real factory Honda. They made the car the whole shooting match. They had an air-cooled V8 engine in a magnesium monocoque chassis. It was a pretty wild car. They didn't race it much, but and it claimed the life of Joe Slesser. But I drove in Monza briefly, and I drove the V12 engine car in the race.
Those numbers, incidentally, included 2 tours in Formula One. Honda was briefly out of the series in the 70s before coming back in the 1980s to dominate the sport with 11 championships, both drivers and constructors, in the 10 years they have been in. There is Michael Schumacher running in second place in the Benetton Ford, the only team to have scored points in every one of the 15 races to date in Formula One this year. We'll be back to Australia in just a moment. 51 laps complete. 20 laps remain in the Grand Prix of Australia from beautiful Adelaide, capital of the province of South Australia. 15½ hours ahead of East Coast time in the United States. Don't ask me to explain why they decided to add that extra 30 minutes. It is springtime in Australia. Temperatures will get very hot here in Adelaide on the southern shore. There is Martin Brundle, who trails his teammate Michael Schumacher by about 23 seconds. As you saw, Schumacher trails leader Gerhard Berger by 24 seconds. So there could be 2 Benetton drivers on the podium here in Adelaide, but there is much racing yet to be done. Martin Brundle had such a terrible start at the beginning of this year, dropped out of 4 straight races, but in the next 11, he had only 1 non-finish, and he was in the points in all the rest. There is Gerhard Berger, who has really surged into the role of contender with the McLaren Honda team, particularly in light of the fact that his teammate Ayrton Senna has had mechanical troubles this year. Senna has won races, but so has Berger, the victor in Canada. Senna with 3 victories. Riccardo Patrese with 1. Patrese is out of this race. Schumacher with a victory. And, of course, Nigel Mansell has 9. And that is where his record will stay for all eternity as he leaves Formula One at the end of this year. Look back through the rest of the field. The rain appears to have let up. We haven't had any other signs of wetness on the course. The onboard cameras have showed no raindrops. There's Aguri Suzuki in the red and white footwork Honda car, giving Martin Brundle fits.
Aguri Suzuki will stay with the footwork Honda team next year. They're supposed to having a much revised V10 engine with more horsepower, a bit less weight. And of course he will be joined by Derek Warwick, which will be great for a lot of the British fans. Derek Warwick's very popular amongst a lot of Formula One fans all around the world, and he's been wanting to get back in Formula One for a couple of years. Well, next year he will be.
As you can see, the onboard camera shot is clear. Brundle closing in on Suzuki. Good clean pass. Riccardo Patrese's car remains there. There are cranes all around this circuit. As you look at Martin Brundle's statistics this year, 99 Formula One starts, the same number that Jackie Stewart had when he retired from the sport. His best finish is second this year at Monza. Been in the top 6 in the last 8 races, and the top 6 in 10 of the last 11 races. And a man being mentioned in connection with a number of IndyCar drives in North America.
Certainly would be a tremendous waste to not have Martin Brundle in a competitive car, whether it be Formula One or Indianapolis type cars. Of course, he's pretty popular in America. They used to call him Billy Bob Brundle because he did the IROC and took on the best that NASCAR could get and made a pretty good impression.
Absolutely. Also drove in the IMSA Camel GT Series. There you see Michael Schumacher has knocked the fastest lap record down into the 116s, over 110-mile-an-hour average.
Now that is a pretty serious leap up. Obviously that rain that we saw spotting has stopped as this group fight furiously. Fittipaldi, Morbidelli and Harkonnen, and they're still racing for that 7th, 8th, 9th and 10th spot.
That's Johnny Herbert in the Lotus, actually. Herbert, who was running 3 laps down, but is running in lockstep with this group, the 2 Minardis. I mentioned that Morbidelli and Fittipaldi are closely associated with this Minardi team. Morbidelli's family, a very wealthy family in Italy, has been helping with the financing of the team, so it's unlikely that he would be out of a drive with the team next year. That leaves Christian Fittipaldi in the yellow helmet. One must wonder whether Fittipaldi will remain with his team or find one of the other available seats, perhaps with Tyrrell.
That is a possibility. Brouillard's moving on from Tyrrell as Johnny Herbert puts pressure on both of those drivers. Johnny Herbert, as I said earlier, hasn't had a very lucky season, and he's had quite a lot of stops this afternoon. He's 3 laps down, giving a good account of himself against those 2 Minardis as we go back to our leader, Gerhard Berger, onto the Ravin Straight.
As you can see, Berger's lead is now descending rapidly. It went from 24 seconds to 16 seconds in the matter of a few laps. So Gerhard Berger may be just easing up to save car and tires in the closing laps, or he may be being reeled in by Michael Schumacher.
He may be easing up to save fuel, too, because we heard that the fuel is a problem. And, of course, it's more of a problem for these Valve 12 engines.
Nevertheless, Berger remains the leader, followed by Schumacher, Brundle, Alesi, and Boutsen. Stay with us. Competition, we certainly expect to see him around for many years to come as a car owner. There is Michael Schumacher, 16.9 seconds down to Gerhard Berger. He has not closed in appreciably in the last lap. The Grand Prix of Australia continues.
He has, in fact, set the fastest lap yet again. He's now up to 111-mile-an-hour average, which for a race is pretty staggering through these streets. 116.4. That's 1 minute, 16.4 seconds. 111.2 miles an hour. And the gap down to 13.8 seconds. Closing.
The timing and scoring system recalculated the gap as Schumacher crossed the start-finish line. And he is, in fact, continuing to close in on Berger with 14 laps remaining. Christian Fittipaldi will try a move around the inside of Gianni Morbidelli, his teammate. And Johnny Herbert hangs right in there behind them, and then I believe that's John Alesi in the Ferrari.
John Alesi, who's 1 lap down, but running in 4th spot. So he, too, is unlikely to make any too rash moves at this point. He's not under any pressure from Boutsen, who is a long way behind him. And, of course, Alesi would love those points.
You see the running order in the upper left-hand corner of your screen.
There was a time when you'd never have seen a Ferrari not slashed by a V8 engine car on the straight like that. The Ferrari here appallingly slow, nearly 10 miles an hour slower on the main straight, nearly 5 miles an hour slower on that short pit straight. So they've obviously got a lot of engine work to do.
Correct myself, that is not the Ferrari coming up behind, that is one of the Dolaris. A team that will get Ferrari engines next year, and they have also worked out, as you see, Michael Schumacher's newest lap record over a picture of Gerhard Berger rocketing around. The Scuderia Italia team will retain the longest name in all of Formula One racing. It will be Scuderia Italia Brixia Motorsport Lola Ferrari next year.
Here's some action on the Johnny Herbert trying to go down Fittipaldi. Fittipaldi not particularly wanting to get involved 2 laps in front of Herbert. 1 lap.
Jan Lammers in attendance in the march for all of that, and coming up quickly from behind is the man you just looked at. There is Gerhard Berger. The race leader is going to close up on this battle in about half a lap. It is Lorena. It is a Ferrari.
It is a Ferrari. We got that bit right.
Well, these cars are hard to see from half a world away. The rain has done nothing to dampen the crowd. There is an empty grandstand, but it is placed on somebody's front yard, so maybe he's shooing them away with a shotgun or something. This race has not always received universal acceptance here in Adelaide. There have been several civic groups that have opposed it over the years. The federal government of Australia has lost the equivalent of about $3 million US a year on it, but it brings in about $21 million US to the local economy here in Adelaide. Therefore, it is a very good investment. Now in its 8th year, it's still, for my money, the best street race in the world.
And although it hasn't had universal acceptance, I suppose nothing like this ever will do. By and large, the city really is behind it. I mean, you don't see many negative reports in the newspaper. And the citizens of Adelaide certainly seem to have a tremendous amount of fun while this race is on. When you think of, for instance, how the City of Phoenix approached its city race, I mean, it had nothing but negative comments the whole time. Whereas here, most of the comments are pretty positive.
What you haven't seen on our track maps is Hindley Street, which is sort of the Bourbon Street of Adelaide, Australia. And boy, I mean Bourbon seriously. There's a shrimp on the Barbie every night here in Australia, mate, when the Grand Prix comes to town. Some of the friendliest
is picking his way through this traffic now, as Schumacher is really squeezing up on him now. 11 and a half seconds to go, and about 11 laps.
So the action continues. There's the Stag Pub in the background, by the way. That is the Stag Corner. Down Rundle Road and rocketing on to Brabham Straight. And, of course, this woolly fella couldn't care less what's going on in the Grand Prix of Australia. But we do. We'll be right back. Australia, Bob Barsha and David Hobbs with you. Michael Schumacher continues to close in on race leader Gerhard Berger with 10 laps remaining. There's the interval down to 11 and a half seconds. As he continues to close in, Martin Brundle 50 seconds back. John Alesi in 4th and Terry Boutsen in 5th. Rachel lap down.
Now Michael Schumacher really has got to get around J.J. Leto in that Ferrari engine Dallara.
Have to wait a moment. Quick right-hander coming up, and then the long straightaway. Now he'll have a shot.
Ferrari getting off the corner pretty quickly there. Of course, Schumacher being able to use the slipstream of that car down the inside into everyone's favourite passing zone.
This is where Nelson Piquet and Nigel Mansell had a terrific duke out back in 1990.
Such a shame that Senna had that tremendous brain fade earlier on in this race and ran right over the back of Nigel Mansell. Otherwise, we could be seeing an absolute classic race between those two guys for the lead, possibly with this other very good race between Schumacher and Berger. And we could have had 4 really, really competitive cars out here, which would have made a wonderful afternoon spectator.
The gap now less than 10 seconds, separating Gerhard Berger from Michael Schumacher.
He is actually putting him in at just about a second a lap. And there are 10 laps to go. Only 10 seconds behind. So this does have the makings of a rather dramatic finish to the final race of the year here in Adelaide.
Michael Schumacher, without question, the revelation of 1992 in Grand Prix racing, just 23 years old. And there you see the gap has widened a bit again. Berger 10 seconds over Schumacher last time around. Berger about to throw a pass on Christian Fittipaldi. The rain mercifully has let up. Rain on a street circuit is always dangerous, but particularly so on one as quick as this, averaging 110 miles an hour. Michael Schumacher's new race lap record, 111.793 miles per hour. Give a thought for Gerhard Berger. After struggling as number 2 to Ayrton Senna for so long, Senna, of course, likes to take the off-season literally off and do no testing at all. Gerhard Berger, meanwhile, goes pounding around racetracks all over the world, testing new McLaren Honda gadgets. And when Senna comes back, he simply gets in the car and blows Berger off. But this year, Berger has really come on strong. He is in line for a possible second victory this season. His teammate Senna has 3. But Gerhard Berger will be driving next year. Senna will not.
Well, we don't know yet. We just think no. He will not stay. He says he knows what he's going to do, but he won't tell us. Because he doesn't really know what he's doing.
Well, Berger says Senna told him that he will not drive next year. Of course, Berger said, knowing Senna, he could be in Indy cars next year. He could be driving karts. Senna also said, there are other cars that I have driven before, and I could drive them again. I take that to mean he's not going back to British Formula 3.
No, it makes you wonder what he does mean. I can't think what else he's doing. He drove a Mercedes once in the German touring car championship. I can't imagine going to the German touring car championship. Maybe he will.
He's also driven a rally car once.
After going down the inside there of Morbidelli.
14 cars still circulating of the 26 that started. Berger, Schumacher, Brundle, Alesi, Boutsen, Modena, then Hakkinen, Suzuki, Fittipaldi, and Morbidelli, Marini, Leto, Lammers, and Herbert. And no sooner do I finish telling you about it than the Australians would like you to see it for yourself. The gap holding at 10 seconds. Berger to Schumacher.
Laps running down now, 8 to go. Johnny Herbert there about to be put away by Michael Schumacher. They've obviously fixed that Lotus now. It seems to be going pretty well at the moment. That in the background there, the race, that's Morbidelli and Marini. That's a race for position. That is in fact the race for 10.
Johnny Herbert has just 4 finishes this season. He has been in the points once, and that twice, in the very first race of the year in South Africa back in March, and in France at Manicourt on July 5th. Other than that, he has been in every race, and he has dropped out of almost all of them.
Of course, Jerry Berger had that win in Canada when Senna, having taken the lead at the beginning of the race, forced Nigel off the road, which caused a little bit of comment between Nigel and Ron Dennis, Senna's owner. Gap now down to 8.4 seconds as Gerhard Berger comes up to go around to Dewey Suzuki.
Extraordinary to think about the physical effort of driving these cars for almost 2 hours on a 75-degree day and quite humid in Adelaide. Derek Warwick, as we mentioned, will be Aguri Suzuki's teammate with the footwork operation next year as you see the gap back to the second-place car of Michael Schumacher. Derek Warwick, despite the fact that he has spent 2 full seasons driving equally complex, equally fast sports cars, says he is not fit enough yet to drive to optimum performance in a Formula One car. They are that difficult to drive. Warwick, of course, the world sports car champion, the last world sports car champion for a while, as that series will not be renewed in 1993. He also won the 24 Hours of Le Mans this year. We'll be back with more from Australia. How ironic. In a Formula One year dominated by the Williams-Renault team of Nigel Mansell and Riccardo Patrese, in the closing laps of the triumphant season finale, neither Williams-Renault is still running. It is Gerhard Berger by 8.5 seconds over this man, Michael Schumacher in the Benetton Ford. There you see the gaps with just a few laps remaining in the race. There is Berger. Schumacher will come out of the corner right there. It looks as though with 4 laps to go, the gap is going to come down a bit.
Well, it is possible that the Berger mobile is a little bit tight on fuel, but they've got enough readouts to tell them everything that's going on these cars. There it is, 7.1 seconds down between them. And in fact, Gerhard Berger, when they come round to the main straight, obviously not in sight of Schumacher here, but it will add just a little bit of encouragement to Schumacher, because I think when they go onto the Brabham straight, Berger will be in sight. That's always just a big sort of, that is a real carrot on a stick, and it really works.
As if a guy like Schumacher really needs one.
But, of course, he's got to get around Morbidelli here first.
There is Berger. Let's look back up the straight, and there is Schumacher coming around Morbidelli as the corner worker works his blue flag furiously.
Sorry, it's not Morbidelli, it's
Fittipaldi. And surely Michael Schumacher knows how close he is. The pit board will tell him how close, and they'll be screaming at him over the radio. You have a chance. 3 laps to go. We will take you to the checkered flag as you look down on Victoria Park. One of only 2 circuits, if I'm not mistaken, where open betting is allowed on the race. The other being the Grand Prix of Great Britain at Silverstone. And I would imagine with both Nigel Mansell and Riccardo Patrese out of the race, some serious money is going to change hands. If you put down a quid or 2 on Gerhard Berger, you stand to collect big time in Adelaide today. Somebody right on the rev limiter might be Gerhard Berger. 7.1 seconds separate Berger from Schumacher. Everyone else is out of it. Brundle almost a full minute behind in 3rd place.
Schumacher coming up using the 6-speed of Suzuki's car there. Pulls out and turns into the park. V8 engine stressed mightily. This Cosworth Ford V8 revs to 13,500 RPM. And of course the bore and stroke on those is pretty big. And that's one of the things that makes that engine just so remarkable. It revs so high for a V8 engine.
The gap down to 6.3 seconds now with 2 laps remaining. And word from the pits is that Gerhard Berger may be running out of fuel. With 2 laps to go, just over 5 miles. There you see Berger.
Boy, now that would be very hard at this stage of the race for Gerhard Berger to accept if his car did in fact run out of fuel or misfire or just not quite get into the finish line.
Very delicately put. Hard to accept. Oh, it's like saying Pavarotti can sing a little. Just
and there you see the gap now. That is a very close gap. For a minute there, Schumacher slowed up. It was just the effect of that long lane. Ooh, locks up the right front there. Flat spot that, but he won't worry about that. A couple of laps to go, that's all.
I was a bit surprised to note, there goes Emanuele Maspetti, to note the Benetton there is still scraping the ground, the rub strip. It is a bumpy course, but it has been resurfaced, and the drivers to a man say it is 100% better than it used to be. Berger also scraping. 1 lap to go. The final lap for Gerhard Berger. He's probably pushing as hard with his toes as he can.
He's got fingers crossed on the steering wheel, too, I think.
Don't do that. You won't know whether to shift up or down.
He's got a pretty good cushion, 6 seconds, but nevertheless, on these last few laps is when you start to hear all those funny noises in the engine. Oh, God, did it misfire then? Or does it feel a bit funny going through the corner? But there, you see, look at that Schumacher right behind him now. Just a few corners left to go as Berger catches up with Johnny Herbert again in the Lotus.
Well, we know one thing. Nigel Mansell will not be caught for the World Championship. Riccardo Patrese is secure in 2nd. Michael Schumacher will surpass Ayrton Senna for 3rd place. And Gerhard Berger will remain in 5th place behind his teammate Senna, just 1 point behind. So the final standings will be Mansell, Patrese, Schumacher, Senna, and Berger. The checkered flag is out. Schumacher is in close attendance, but he's going to make it close.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy, that was a bit finely judged, I'd say.
Well, we are professionals after all. The flagman in Australia, a traditional part of the sport, and he has really worked his little arm off this weekend. Another thing Adelaide is famous for is action on the track. There are no lulls between practice and qualifying sessions. They have karts out there. They have stock cars out there. Martin Brundle goes down the inside of one of the Ligers.
That's Thierry. Ooh, and still Thierry boots in there in the Ligier. Thierry, of course, he'll get points today for the first time this year. Coming in 5th, that'll pick him up 2 points.
Martin Brundle right there will finish 3rd. Jean Alesi 4th, Boots in 5th, and Stefano Modena will pick up a point for the Jordan Yamaha team. A fitting way to end that relationship that held so much potential at the beginning of the year.
Get that flag man probably puts in almost as much time practicing that flag as these guys do practicing in these cars.
On board with Michael Schumacher, waving to the crowd. It threatened to rain, but it didn't. There's Berger taking it nice and easy. The remaining drops of fuel in the tanks of his McLaren Honda. Schumacher has passed him. They receive the plaudits of the crowd. Schumacher with oil all over his visor. The final race is now in the books. And Gerhard Berger has won it, his 2nd of the season, as he leaves the McLaren team and returns to Ferrari. We'll be back with more in a moment. Had so much to do with the eventual finish order as Mansell and Senna sped away. Keep your eyes at the back of the field where 4, possibly 5 cars were taken out in a true traffic jam.
That's Pierluigi Martini has pushed out there. Grouillard, who touched him, ran into him there. There's one of the Lotuses, Johnny Herbert down there with that deranged front wing. All in all, actually, for the rest of the field, pretty lucky escape that more damage wasn't done there.
But of course, the most dramatic moment of the race, and what would be the finale of the Formula One season without a little bit of controversy, Nigel Mansell with Ayrton Senna just behind, under braking. Senna punts the world champion up the back.
Senna's story we have heard so far is that he thought that Nigel Mansell outbraked him, braked early rather, in the middle of the road and left him absolutely nowhere to go. And I must say that I'd need to see that replay again to just establish who really was at fault. Hard to tell.
Afterwards, Senna